This is all maybe to all three of you. So do you remember any kind of individual moments or stories where you've seen kind of your approach that you talked about click with people? Kind of any anecdotes or any kind of situations where you've seen it, and perhaps why did that happen?
I could start. So the Stefan example that I gave, when he came back from the customer visits and observations, he was totally mind blown on the how he saw that the assumptions that he had didn't hold at all. But somehow he had been living in a bubble. So getting that bubble burst is a thing that he's been referring several times after that.
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because that was going to be my example exactly, is getting people involved and coming with you to the customer interviews, and then realizing that the idea that they've been sort of driving forward actually has no friction with the customer, and that sort of a humility and interest to learn, desire to learn more, and again sort of the understanding of the value of the customer feedback that comes from that. So it's at the same time, you know, it boils down to these very small, in a way, small moments, which can be then really like the starting point of something much bigger.
Yeah, I guess I always feel like specific examples really are so powerful sometimes. So either a story from a user or a quote, or actually even metrics, right? In my work now at Google, we work a lot, of course, with data, and just showing that the impact nuances have on an actual user behavior, like a small language change or copy change in your call to action, for instance, and the impact it has on how people actually behave with it. Like, I think if you discuss it, then people might think, okay, well, you know, it's such a small change that should we really invest or capacity to actually implement this. But once you actually show the value of something, and I think it's the same with just stories, I think it becomes real, right? And I think it really sparks that that motivation and that curiosity actually to try again. So I think coming up with examples and proof, basically as ammunition, basically to your story, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that I mentioned in the beginning kind of this live stream examples, and often, especially when we work at an agency, there's sometimes a tendency that kind of we go out and do some research and then bring back a report to the client, for example, and that's much less powerful than, like Ulla said, bringing people to the journey and kind of bringing them to the customers themselves, either physically or at least through video or through documentation. And I think there's also kind of a broader thing with kind of pedagogy right now, where even in schools, kids are learning by doing. And I think really you understand design thinking and kind of lean methods only by taking the journey and having the aha moments yourself.
I want to bring one thing which I'm very much focusing now is scaling. So how do you scale from those individual kind of reflections and stories, and that has been much about kind of building communities within our organization, getting the people to meet, because we are in the silos, so there's different communities of practice. Of course, the program is a kind of a container also for community, so people get strength from each other. So what are the ways that you can create a container where people interact, share, have serendipitous moments where they hear somebody else doing something that would be accidentally a happy accident for them, that they learn about that. And in a busy environment, somebody mentioned busyness or time as a challenge. This is extremely crucial, and that's why also this is a kind of a container for us.
I would actually have a sort of a counter question to that, and knowing that we all work in an office building and so forth, does your office enable that sort of a thing happening where people actually work, like have these communal spaces and work together in a way that they have an opportunity for sharing? Because I have to say that while I've had the opportunity to work in gorgeous environments architecturally, and they're open plan and so forth. There's no war rooms, there's no project rooms, there's no ability to just, like huddle next to a wall and put some stuff there, and also the work culture, it's meeting after meeting after meeting. There's not really sort of that much collaboration happening. So ideally, sure, but it would be interesting. Have you done some work in your sort of like I know Google does amazing offices and so forth, but just like to hear.
In an industrial company, yes, we pay attention to that, but there's another element, which is that most of our people are not in a single site. So how do you, again, the question about scaling, how do you scale that over different geographies, locations, business units, and what's the way you need to think about more than just the physical spaces? So what are the ways of virtually creating communities? How do you facilitate that? We've been, for the last year, arranging a lot of virtual facilitation courses for people so that they understand that what the different, especially Google tools are extremely good. You can have 50 people working on the same document at the same time. How can you leverage that? How do you kind of have people collaborating and feeling that they are in the same space, even if they are not physically there? That's a question that we're still exploring, but there's a lot of need for that. Otherwise, local, we have 100 people here from 11,000. It's a drop in an ocean.
That's a really, really good point. We did some work also with IBM around scaling design thinking, and one of the things that they did, they set up really nice kind of design spaces, but they also paid a lot of attention to how can you be present with telepresent in that kind of same space. So for example, they had iPad stands where it was like a constant video feed connection to other people in other locations, so that you also have that, because I think in kind of telco meetings, you also lose that kind of human emotional connection to each other and to the work, which is, I think, really important for this work.
Yeah, we've learned so far on how to facilitate workshops, but we haven't cracked the code of the water cooler discussions because that's also an important element. For a meeting, you need to schedule that, and it's clear, but there's so many things that are valuable that are not scheduled in meetings.
You guys are talking, you were also talking about very sort of in a way advanced cultures already, where you've already set up those systems, like online systems and so forth. But I wonder, I mean, there's probably people who are also sort of considering, how to just get started with it. And it's also about finding those people who are sort of influencers within the work community, who are either by their position or just by their presence, loud and opinionated, but also people listen to them, and cracking them is one of those things.
Yeah, I really like that point. I think also if you want to spread kind of a mindset or something, I think it's really important to have champions. I think influencers, people who other people can relate to, I think is very important. So having people to tell a story. So I think in my case, for instance, I'm in a small behavioral science team, but working with the different teams, having someone in the team, like in a product team, for instance, that really believes in behavioral science, right? It's so important that that person then, of course, talks to other product teams about because it's easier for the other product teams to relate to that person than to me at that point, right? So I think it's really important to identify who those champions are and who are the right people to kind of spread the word, right? And get other people excited.
Yeah, and how to enable those people.
Yeah, it's really good points. Any questions from the audience at this point?
Hi, thank you for the inspiring speeches. I was wondering, you all are sort of like internal change agents. So how do you see the role of these external experts and design consultancies? Like, how can you, I feel like we're entering this world of these evolving constellations of collaboration that it's not so black and white anymore. So how do you make the best partnerships in order to transform organizations?
Mark didn't put Anni up to this at all.
No, not at all.
That's a great question. Yeah, the boundaries between different organizations is a bit of a blurry. Well, you can see that from the customer and us, we are co-creating the solutions, but it's the same using the different competences. For example, in the program, our people didn't have competences on service design, business design, and so on, so it was extremely important to bring a partner like Idean to work with our teams. And the main goal that I gave for that program is that it's not to do for our people, but with them, so that there's the learning element. So both ways, of course, there's a learning for the coaches and the designers who are working there, learning about the industry and learning about different customer problems, but for our people, especially learning the methods, processes, catching the thinking element there.
Yeah, the cross-pollination in a way that happens from sort of a collaborating with a external agency. It's important for internal designers. I don't, was it you guys who used the term Stockholm syndrome that starts happening when internal designers are just working within business units and they start actually sort of emulating and just speaking the language of the business people. And while the thing where you need to sort of you need to constantly stay a little bit upset and angry at the current situation to really sort of see where you can do improvement. So anger in a way is positive force, and for that sort of like having that perspective for from sort of outside in is that sort of a collaboration. It's a hard thing. It's a good question because at the same time, there's. We were just celebrating the first stage of the clinic ending, where one of our agency partners who were sort of running the clinic, they now no longer do it, and we will do it with our internal sort of a design team. What that means is that we're now on our own, and that's a little bit scary because where do we get those new ideas and so forth? So I think future is still sort of it's even probably more collaborative relationship. It's no longer we commission a project and there's some fairy dust that is sprinkled and then people come to us. Because as Matias said earlier, is even those stages of like, yes, interviews, we get our own staff to join the interviews, but still often the analysis part is, for example, done by the agency and then the sort of results are presented. Whereas we really sort of want to open the curtains and trot along you guys through the whole way.
Yeah, we actually recently ate our own dog food and we did some customer interviews and some insights. I also bothered Ulla for it. And I think the biggest takeaways from that was that as design, for example, has matured so much in Finland, there's so much also competence in that in a lot of companies in-house. I think it's a lot more about that agencies perhaps help build capabilities, cross-pollinate and also introduce folks from different companies in events and things like this. And then also, like Ulla said, that working in a sort of black box way where you give a brief to an agency, they go to their kind of offices and drink some lattes and then come back with the thing that they reveal. I think those days are long gone. It's more about working as equals and kind of bringing kind of own perspectives to it. Really good question. Any other questions?
Hi, my question is to Jukka Lindström. You mentioned something about having metrics in the business acceleration to know where you are, and I think metrics is a really important aspect. But often defining those metrics is really difficult, especially when you don't have those revenues involved and reflect. Do you have any concrete examples or tips on how to define those metrics so that people at the seat today can take away and then start applying at their work?
Yes, I would take a look at innovation accounting. That's mostly for the teams themselves so that they know what is important. What they're based on learning goals and so on. So what are you trying to learn, and you set out KPIs and metrics on that one. Other thing that we've done and currently revising, we have a quite detailed model of self-evaluation where the teams can see where they are in their pathway from a very rough kind of first idea to being on the markets and a scaled business or mature business, or more or less. With 9 levels, with many different dimensions. There's dimensions for team, so we map. So if you're in level 1, this is what it means. You have one guy with an idea. If you're level 5, it should be when you're entering market. This is how it should look. You should be having these kind of people in your team. Are you there? You can check mark whether you are there or not. Similar for the value proposition, the market, scaling, operations, resourcing, funding, risk, contracts. So many different dimensions, because many of our people didn't know how much really work you need to do in order to get to the market. And when we had the first version of this, what we call a maturity assessment, we noticed that many of our teams were very, very high on the product and product level. So they built the product, but they were totally lacking from the business model. So they were level 1 on business model, where they were level 4 on the product. And they're like, okay, hey, maybe this is where you should be now concentrating rather than making your product better. So that's not a quantitative, but a qualitative metric, where there are certain kind of things that the teams self-evaluate. But that's been extremely helpful. The feedback from the teams has been, oh, we didn't even know that it would be now good to start thinking about like how to set up the invoicing processes, because we're going to be launching in 3-4 months. But yeah, maybe it would be good to think about that. How do we send out the first invoices?
Another really good question. We're officially out of time, but maybe people who really have to leave can leave, and let's take a few more questions.
Thank you. A short one. I was just wondering if it's ever an issue to get your customers to be involved. Like, you just say, we are going to be sending some awkward engineer to come and talk to you, and they're like, yay, bring it on, I have nothing better to do today. Is it an issue? No.
No, not for us. They'd be happy to share. In fact, that was also one thing that our teams told, that they were surprised how much our customers, of course, these were customers with whom we have a relationship, an ongoing relationship, how much they were willing to tell about their problems. So a few of them even opened their books, showing that this is the amount of money we're losing because of this challenge.
Guys, I thought I'd sort of chip into that one from a point of view that it's interesting, because I mean, the assumption might be that sort of an introverted engineer might be a challenging person to sort of get connected with a customer, but at the same time, it could be the extroverted salesperson who's really difficult to coach, to tone it down. Do not ask about the brands, whether they buy this or this product. Just listen what the customer says. And the same thing, again, it is also about the environment in which you meet. Because at the bank, customers, when we invite people over, we try to explain to our customers that this is a product development interview and so forth. But at the same time, they still come with that sort of idea that, well, I didn't pay my last bill and my credit card is overdue and so forth. Whereas we have to start by explaining that we have no knowledge of your sort of a customer history with us and so forth. This is the specific thing that we want to talk to you about. So there is this, in a sense, actually, interestingly enough, that the challenges are everywhere and might not be where you assume that there are.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that the biggest difficulties we've had have been with B2B companies. And there, I think it's natural, since a lot of, for example, account managers or salespeople, they own the relationship of an account that can be tens or hundreds of millions euros of worth. And especially for an outside agency, it's really hard to develop that trust to be able to go and speak to that customer, which I totally understand. So I think it's about also building that trusting relationship and also kind of being transparent about what is being done there and building that trust that way.
Yeah, the challenge has been mostly internal, getting our teams to meet the customers.
Exactly,
so the intermediate, the account owner has been, no, it's not a good time. And
exactly, yeah.
Might you have some ideas for us to sort of going forward, is how to break that ice, or as a behavioral scientist?
Good question. I feel like one thing that always is really important, and we just quickly discussed this before to your question earlier, is the feeling of ownership, right? And kind of, I think people are typically really willing to cooperate or collaborate or to help moving things, to a better place, if they feel like, oh, I'm valued, right? My opinion is actually important. And I think stressing and emphasizing that that their value in the process, either like the members in the team or the customers, I think is super important. Like giving them that feeling of ownership and like your opinion matters, and you have kind of the chance to become an important part in the chain of like change, right? And I think that could be very powerful.
Thank you. And I think that's a good note to wrap this official part of the event. And thanks so much for our speakers, Jukka, Linda, and Ulla, for joining us.